Full disclosure. After a recent episode of Mike's Sword Hospital, another Chinese sword maker reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to promote their products. And I said, that's not what I do. And I explained the deal I have with Murasame to take his returns and evaluate them honestly. And they said, well, they wouldn't have any returns to send me because their swords are so good they don't get returned. Okay, so what did they have in mind? Well, they said they'd be willing to send me a couple of review samples, or they gave me the option and a list of suggestions to go to their Amazon store, buy something from them myself, and if I gave them a good review, they would reimburse me. All right, I want you to keep the words good review in your head. Who are we talking about? Fidestisan. It's not really a name that rolls off the tongue. So I took the opportunity to ask, does it mean anything? And they said, yes, it's a portmanteau. It's a combination of the words fidelity and artisan. It's what they're trying to live up to. Awesome. But then it took me a minute to realize there's a random S in the middle of Fidestisan that isn't part of fidelity or artisan. So what does the random S stand for? There's a couple of possibilities. Maybe we'll figure it out in today's video. But stop the conversation right there. But I was curious enough. Check out the Amazon store. Now, on their Amazon store right now, what you're going to find is mostly what I would consider low-end, low-budget reproductions. But then if you go to their main web page, they have quite a selection in terms of builds, all the way up to the Chinese equivalent of Tamahagane. So maybe they really are trying to live up to fidelity artisan. So willing to give them a shot and curious enough at this point to risk a little bit of my own money. Went back to Amazon and selected something that interested me enough to blow $155 on it, with no intention whatsoever of being compensated in any way. Hasn't even arrived yet, so I'm doing this part of the video before I've even laid eyes on it. And my intention is to give it a good review. Now, again, there's a couple of different ways you can interpret good review. Am I simply going to hand them a glowing review no matter what I get in the box? Or am I going to give their product a proper, thorough, detailed, objective, balanced review? Well, hopefully you know me enough by now to know which course I'm going to take. And then they can decide whether it was a good idea or not to reach out to me. So let's see how this goes. All right, it's arrived. So our first S word is S is for shipping. And it was really fast. It came in 5 days from when I ordered it. Now, I usually don't do unboxing videos, so in this case, S is for stupid on my part and should have. Because if it doesn't come in one of those signature Longchuan styrofoam boxes, if they're shipping me a sword in a cardboard box, I'm used to most places double boxing it, but in this case they didn't. It just came in the brand labeled box with the sword couched in these kind of U-shaped foam rubber pieces, but yikes. This would be the Suba sticking clean through the box. Not just through the box. Inside it was in a plastic bag, and yes, it was in a satin sword bag. And yikes, cut clean through the sword bag. Basically looked like the sword had been dragged behind a truck, Indiana Jones style. Was there any damage to the sword? None whatsoever. S is for stunning. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so S isn't for spoilers or suspense because you've already seen what I selected from the title of the video. The Sucker Punch Babydoll Katana. Am I a particular fan of the movie? No, not really. From an artistic perspective, yes, I can see all of the things that Zack Snyder was going for, and if I was a film student, I could probably write a thesis about it. But the final product, yeah, just didn't click with me. However, of the offered selection, now if you go to, as I mentioned, you go to the Fidestisan website, they have quite a large selection at all sorts of different tiers of quality. And the swords in their $300 and $400 class actually look really promising. But that's not what they have on their Amazon store right now. They have some swords in the $100 range and some in the sub-$100 range. So budget, low budget, and frankly, none of them appealed to me except for this one. Now, many years ago when the movie came out, Master Cutlery issued a limited run of, well, wall hanger licensed reproduction prop swords. And from the reviews I've seen, they were all functionally garbage. Fine for sitting on a shelf and looking at from a distance, but yeah, not intended to function as swords. And from what I've seen, Fidestisan attempted to put some effort into making a good quality functional version of the sword for $155. So how did they do? All right, I'm going to start on the friendly end because I think that's where, well, a lot of the value got put into this sword. Remember, $155. So what I would consider definitely budget range. What are they giving you for the money? What kind of effort and materials did they put into it? Well, S is for surprised. The Fuchikashira and Suba are blackened copper. I was expecting, cast Zamak garbage, and I got some pretty good fittings. Now, there are some slight seams on there, but being that these fittings are actual copper, I could reshape and clean these up, no problem. So the casting quality on the fixtures, it's not bad at all. So I'm going to have to give props for that. And yes, like I said, survived coming through the side of that box and being dragged enough to rip through that satin sword bag. And there's not a scratch on it. So nice. Also, all the fixtures are pretty well tight. There's a little tiny bit of wiggle in the Kashira. Now the wrap is, as far as I can tell, that sort of leather jacket or leather glove leather. So not a high grade of leather, but at least it's not the really plasticky fake stuff. So yeah, I'm going to have to give them props for that. Suka length is 10.5 inches, 26 centimeters. So a little bit more on the shorter side, but it's a length that I personally appreciate. Ray skin, real. Construction, double pin, full tang. Now the Nakago is nothing fancy to look at, and yeah, there's a little bit of corrosion on it and some strange green staining. I'll show some pictures, but it is a full tang. The build is really solid, and when we talk about handling, the sword feels really good in the hand. Now, are the diamonds perfect? Absolutely not. But everything is, reasonably snug. Again, we're talking $155. So, value down here, superb. What about the rest of it? All right, S is for Saya. Now, the look of the sword is actually pretty true to the movie version in terms of the fixtures, and yes, the snowflake pattern on the Saya. It's a pretty kind of slightly sparkly paint job, but as you can see, there are a couple flaws in it. Also, a couple of spots where a little bit of scraping has occurred, and given what happened with the Suba coming through the box and surviving absolutely intact, I don't think these necessarily happened in shipping. Might have been in handling at the factory. But again, we're talking about a $155 sword. These tend to come with pretty generic one-size-fit-all Saya. So it is just wood. It does have some, taper to it. It's not just oval, so it is narrower towards the edge side. But no horn fixtures or anything like that. The Sageo, it's also just basic leftover Ito. Nothing fancy there. You can certainly hear already that there's a little bit of rattle down in this end. We'll take a look at the blade in a second. But at the Koiguchi, there's a reasonable amount of retention without it being crazy tight. So I think, that's pretty nice. So S for satisfactory. For the price again, yeah, kind of what I expected. Okay, S is for stats. I already mentioned we have a 10.5 inch or 26 centimeter Suka. There's a bit of curvature to it. Feels really good in the hand. It's not too beefy or not too slim. Doesn't really have much in the way of taper to it. But blade, fairly standard length for reproduction, 27.5 inches measured from the habaki, 70 centimeters. With a pretty standard 1.25 inch, 3 centimeter wide blade at the base. Distal taper, 7 millimeters down to 3. So maybe a little shade slimmer than some of the other reproductions I have. Now, it is a Shinogi Zukiri profile with no bohi. It is a 1095 high carbon steel. It is oil quenched. They did not clay temper it, and I really, really appreciate the fact that they did not put a fake hamon on it. We'll talk about the engravings and the fit and finish here in a second. But weight, kind of in the weight range I would expect. 2 pounds 5 ounces or 1,048 grams. Point of balance is sitting at 4 inches off the habaki, so 10 centimeters. A little bit further forward, and we'll talk about how that, well, makes the blade feel in hand in terms of maneuvering, cutting, blade presence. Let's talk about, however, the blade itself, the fit, finish, and, well, one of the things that attracted me to it. All right, semi-confession time. Why did I really pick this sword? Well, among the selection that I had available to me at the Amazon store, this one did stand out. As I mentioned, not a particular fan of the movie, but I really did like the look of the sword, not just in terms of the fixtures down here, but we will talk about this Horomono. Was intriguing to me. And yeah, I have to admit that maybe having a sword I could call Babydoll appealed to, well, my somewhat twisted nature. And if you're familiar with, well, my writing, you know, somewhat twisted nature. So yes, there are a couple of reasons why I selected this sword. And I was definitely intrigued to see what they would do with it. Would they give me a good quality functional sword? And I would have to say this sword does have a lot of impressive potential, but it also has some problems. Again, we're talking about $155 budget sword, and a lot of value went into this end of it. The blade is pretty well shaped for a 1095 blade. Again, it's not clay tempered. I did take it out and do some cutting with it, and specifically was looking at abusive cutting as well. So it does have a paper cutting, cardboard cutting edge. I did spend some time whacking it into some dry bamboo and some lumber and some branches and that plastic bucket of death that damaged the killer rabbit. And it's got barely any micro rolling to speak of. Edge hardness is rating about maybe a 55. So pretty resilient blade, and if I need to repair an edge, I'm not terribly worried about repairing a through hardened blade. Now there is just a very slight kind of clipped bluntness on the tip. Again, something I can fix very easily. The Yokote is purely cosmetic. Polish on the blade, not bad. Now, a couple of issues I have come across, and again, we're talking about a $155 sword. If you look down here, there is a heck of a gap in the fit with the habaki. But it is something I can fix. I haven't bothered yet. Same thing with some of the flaws in the casting. I might decide to clean this up. But speaking of cleanup, all right, you've probably already noticed it. Being true to the movie sword, On each side replicated is a set of engravings, a horomono, that sort of tells the story of the movie. Now, on one side, it's pretty good. It's not the cleanest engraving. It is an acid etch, so they probably used a stencil, but not bad at all. However, on the other side, this end of it's not bad, right? So far, so good. But then you get to the very bottom, and it just sort of it fades out. And I did ask them about that, and their response was, well, you know, low-budget sword probably happened either in the etching or the polishing process. It's something they consider as a to be expected. So that was a little disappointing. But here I am thinking, okay, well, I'm going to do some work on the rest of this sword. I feel like it's got a lot of potential. Maybe I can do some experimenting with different kinds of etching. And I mean, it's not an expensive sword that I'm worried about ruining. So that could be a to be continued topic for a future video. As a sword, though, how does it handle? Okay, I spent a couple of days with this sword, and I have to say, remember, $155 budget sword that I did not buy as a movie collectible. I bought it as a sword that I intended to put to some use, and I wanted to know if they were able to give me a movie reproduction that appealed to me aesthetically. It was a functional sword, or at least one that had potential to be a functional sword. And I'm going to have to say, yes. Again, nothing fancy in terms of the saya, but yeah, draw is nice and smooth. Decent retention. Handling in the hand, that grip is quite comfortable. Actually makes me think about rewrapping some of my other swords. If I can find some more of this material, I might give it a try. And I was here thinking that one of the first things I would have to do is replace this with some, at least imitation silk ito. But no, I think I'm going to leave it absolutely as is. Might clean up the fittings, the casting lines just a little bit. But I'm not going to make any modifications. I will modify the fit of the hibaki because there's a nice big gap in there, and yeah, I'm probably going to see what I can do about, well, that part of the etching that's washed out. But initial results in cutting. Now, I've tried to quantify how a sword feels in hand in previous videos, and I talked about my sweet spot for Japanese style swords being an 8. Anything slightly below that means a lighter, faster sword. Anything slightly above that means one that's heavier. It's got more blade presence for cutting. This one sits exactly at an 8. So for me, yeah, it's a great middle-of-the-road, all-purpose sword that could be just fine, I think, for training with. It's got a decent edge. It cuts well, being that it is not very expensive and also through-hardened. I'm not worried about beating it up, chipping it, rolling it. It would be an easy sword to repair. Yeah, just, I don't know. I think for $155 as a sword, it is one that I do appreciate in terms of its just function as a sword. So, yeah, going to do a little work on it, so there might be a to be continued. But am I pleased with my selection? Yes. Am I overall pleased with what I received? Well, other than a few problems, I would have to say for the money, yes. Am I going to be doing future business with Fidestisan? I don't know. But this is the point in the video where you tell me what you think. Let's get our conversation going in the comments. If you've got any questions, any concerns, want more information, if you've done business with Fidestisan before, we can talk about that. But until, well, whatever I get myself up to next, thanks as always for watching, following my journey, tolerating my madness, subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, adding to our conversation. And I do hope to see you back for whatever the next chapter is.